Welcome to the Wrestling with Success podcast. In this show, you'll learn how to use lessons used in sports so you can use failure as your secret weapon for success and succeed in the real world. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, husband, father, adventure seeker, and entrepreneur, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Success. Today I bring you Nick DiNardo. If you're looking for more clarity and focus in your life, if you're looking to get clear on your goals and learn how to create a plan to achieve them, then join me and 5 other motivated high performers for a powerful 4-week program starting August 1st. It's called Reveal Your Path, and I've now guided nearly 24 former athletes through it, including Olympians, neurosurgeons, and other high performers, resulting in clarity and powerful transformation. If you want to find more time in your day and restore work-life balance to your world, then do yourself a favor and take a peek at what you'll learn by going to revealyourpath.com today. That's revealyourpath.com. Nick is an entrepreneur, consultant, and public speaker focused on adversity, personal growth, and education. Throughout his career, he's interviewed hundreds of experts from multiple disciplines on overcoming adversity, dealing with trauma and stress, and the crucial role that it plays in our cognitive development and education. Nick has dealt with adversity his entire life. At 7 years old, Nick's family went from living the American dream to a foreclosed home, divorce, and mental illness. He spent a year sleeping on the floor of a one-room apartment and sharing a kitchen with 17 people. He writes and podcasts about his journey, the story, and the science of adversity and personal growth at nickdinardo.com. That's Nick, D-I-N-A-R-D-O, nickdinardo.com. Nick was a multi-sport athlete in high school. He played football, baseball, and threw the shot put in track. And he played football at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. If you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, or if you hear something that you really like but you don't have time to write it down, be sure to grab your copy of the action plan from this episode, as well as get access to action plans from every episode at jimharshaw.jr.com/action. Nick, welcome to the show.
Jim, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Good to have you here. You're pretty much an ideal guest for the show. You talk about adversity and struggle and obstacles and setbacks. You're a former athlete. We've all experienced those things through athletics, and we can translate those life lessons into the real world. But first, tell us about your athletic background, Nick.
Sure. So I grew up playing football. I played baseball my entire life, and in high school I threw the shot. And most of my athletic background has been in playing football. Football was my passion growing up. I wasn't always the best. I always tell the story. When I was 9 years old, I was overweight, and I was playing with 12 and 13-year-olds because it's all based on weight class.
Yeah, right.
In Pop Warner.
That's like wrestling. If you're big for a young kid, you end up wrestling kids who are older than you a lot of times when you're younger.
Exactly, and I was just getting beat down. Just getting pummeled, and I would go home crying. And my dad was a great athlete. He was drafted into the majors in baseball. He played baseball at University of Massachusetts Amherst. Really, really good athlete, football player as well. And I would go home like, Dad, I'm quitting. I can't play this. I'm getting killed here. Obviously, I'm not good at this. And he said, you just got to make it through the season. He's like, just play the season out, see what happens. And man, did I not want to listen to him. But by the end of the season, I started to gain a little bit of confidence. I started to hold my own with some players. And by the end of the season, I said, you know what, maybe I can play this game. If I can hold my own with some of these 12 and 13-year-olds, once I grow into my body, maybe there's some other things that I can do. And eventually, I started to grow into it. So it's funny. It's not like I was passionate about football, but I kind of grew to like the game once I started to develop some confidence. And that's what sports does, right, Jim? I mean, you just start to develop that confidence, and it's tough to replicate that in other things. Sports is kind of that microcosm of life. So football is a passion of mine, and athletics is a passion of mine.
Yeah, you said it. Sports is just a microcosm of life. We always talk about the life lessons learned in sports, but so few coaches actually talk about. I don't know about you, but my experience, it was just that, it really wasn't talked about all that much through my, entire career in terms of the life lessons that you learn in sports. And wrestling was my primary sport, but I did football and baseball and soccer and track growing up, cross country in high school. And, but you kind of hear about those things on the fringes, but
right.
How do we really do that? Like, we face this adversity through failure and struggle and losing and coming home crying, and believing you can't do something in sports as a kid. And then, as we persevere and push through, we learn that, okay, maybe I can do this thing. Now we're out in the real world, right? We don't have a team. We don't have a coach. Most people don't have coaches. Most people don't have a team around them that's going to support them and hold them accountable and pick them up when they're down and, pull them down when they're getting too high. We don't have that, most people in the real world. So how do we really replicate that? Or how do we learn from those experiences of failure and struggle and adversity in sports and apply those to our lives?
Well, I mean, it's the environments that are set up around us that really negatively talk about failure and adversity and struggle. And I think about, when I wrote my book, The Game of Adversity, the first thing I did was look up the dictionary definition of adversity. And here's what it is. Adverse fortune or fate, a condition marked by misfortune, calamity, or distress. Or number 2, an adverse or unfortunate event or circumstance. Synonyms are catastrophe, disaster, trouble, misery, and also see affliction. So, I mean, you look at the definition of it, and it's just set up for trying to avoid those things. And then think about parenting. I mean, you're a parent, Jim. I'm a new parent. You can't help yourself but want to protect your children, right? It's tough to expose them to things where they're going to struggle, but it's necessary. And then also think about how our schools are set up. I mean, the grading system is set up so that we don't want to fail. We do not incentivize people to fail and grow from those failures. So there's all these systems kind of set up where the want to grow through struggle is just beaten out of us, just kind of like curiosity is, and that sort of thing early on. So for me, I think what sports does is it creates a safe space to struggle. And you have these mentors and guides along the way, just like you would in a great story, a fiction story, or Rocky or anything like that. And you have these safe areas where you can create stakes to fail. And the more times you go through it, the more times you experience it, the more it just becomes part of your life. And there's this great quote. I think it's a Navy SEAL quote, but we don't rise to the occasion. We actually fall to the level of our training. So the more that we go through that, which is why, as an athlete, I think once you get into the business world, you get into the real world, you don't negatively react to failure the way somebody would who didn't experience sports or art or something where they had to create some stakes. So that's just my take on it, and that's what I try and do in my coaching business.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. When you're an athlete, you have to deal with this pain and suffering of failure, right? My guest on episode 55 was a guy named James Leith. James Leith is the head of leadership development for IMG Academy, and IMG Academy is arguably the top private school in the country for athletes. They have, tons of athletes go on to the pros. It's just incredible what they do. Well, James said this. I actually pulled up the quote from the action plan from his episode. Again, that was episode 55 for the listener if you want to check it out. But he said this. He said, in terms of youth sports, unfortunately, as adults, we've turned youth sports into entertainment. We don't value development as much as we value a winning record. It used to be a real safe place where you could fail and then just try it a different way. And so there's this evolution of youth sports, I think, away from what the real value is, but it's still there, whether it's youth sports or high school sports. It's so important to understand the process, right? The process of succeeding at something, building a business, building a team for the coaches listening, building a team for the entrepreneurs listening, again, building a team, building a business, building a culture, selling a product. It's, you're going to fail. You're going to struggle. The best ones do, but the best ones get up one more time every time, but you have to understand that you're not going to like start your first business or coach your first season and win the championship or hit a home run, the proverbial home run in business. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a battle going through. We learned that in athletics.
Yeah, you mentioned process there. I think that is key to understand, because it gets overlooked. The work gets overlooked. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a coach and a speaker, and he was talking about, what if you could get on a plane and we could drop you at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, 30,000 feet up, and once you got out of that plane, what do you think would happen to you? And what would happen is you would pass out because your lungs are not used to working at that level. You have not earned the right to be at that height. And that's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about achieving goals, right? That I talk a lot about how the downside of goal setting, because we focus so much on these goals that we can cause anxiety and stress, and we're not actually focusing on the process of getting to those goals, and we can kind of put the goal aside and just work on the day-to-day. And if we have the respect and the appreciation for the day-to-day process, the mini goals, the micro goals, then we can get to those goals much easier and appreciate them as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of process-oriented goals. Goals that you can actually do. Well, I'm gonna work out every day. I can do that. You can't say it's gonna be hard to control. There are gonna be a lot of things that are just out of your control. Whether it's your physiology of your body, losing weight, gaining muscle, whatever the case might be. You want to have those goals, but you've got to reverse engineer that process. From Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about start with the end in mind. So you start with the end in mind. You have that goal. And then like you said, you focus on that process, the things that you can actually accomplish, the things that you can do in order to get there. And it's like when you're playing football, there are certain things you can control. And last I watched a football game, you can't control what the other team does, but you can control what you do. You can control if you're the quarterback, the passes that you throw, the communication you have with your team, the communication you have with your coach. You can control, your warm-up. You can control your nutrition, your diet, your sleep. You can control your preparation. You can control how you talk to the referee after he makes a bad call. You control those things, and that's the process, right? That's the process that we have to control in our lives. So love that. We're definitely on the same page with that stuff, Nick. So tell me this. I read in your bio a little bit about the adversity you faced growing up. Are you willing to go into that a little bit more and share a little bit about your personal backstory? Happy to.
I enjoy sharing it because I think it allows people to get a sense for experience and why it's so important in sharing it with other people. But
I think for the listener, it's easy. It's nice for me to have a guy like Nick on the show and talk about all this stuff of how adversity is great for you. But it's like Nick lived it. So talk to us about that.
And that's why I like to talk about it. So so I grew up completely middle class, right? So 3,000 square foot house my dad built. Parents married. Younger brother, 3 years younger than me. Dad owned his own business. He was a garage door owner. He owned a garage door business, and he was a salesman and all this sort of stuff. So that was when I was 7. About 3 months later, completely turned that situation on its head. My mother had a bipolar episode. First of a couple of bipolar episodes. She's manic depressive. And my parents ended up separating. My dad sold his business, but kind of he didn't know how to handle, I think, the success of that business. Ended up going bankrupt. We lost the house, and my parents split up, and my mother was in a mental institution for a while. After that, my mom ended up in this kind of it wasn't a halfway house, but it was just I was in a 1-room, 400 square foot room. My parents were kind of sharing custody, and my dad was in an apartment too. But it was just one room with one bed. And I was the older brother, so I would sleep on the floor. I wanted to make sure that my mom was getting her rest. My brother was getting his rest. And there was this shared kitchen downstairs. With 17 other families, we shared this kitchen. I just remember thinking to myself, at 7 or 8, I'm going, this can't be the way that our lives are going to end up, right? Like, how did we go from this to that? And I just remember looking towards people, and I actually gravitated towards sports. I started looking to people who had overcome really difficult things in their life to achieve great things, like a guy like Barry Sanders, who had this just ultimate humble approach to the game. He would always hand the football off to the ref, but he achieved so much success by being humble, by putting in the work, and just by being a good person. And I would just try and I would try and model that sort of behavior. So sports was a huge thing for me, but that circumstance was kind of the seed that has led now to my interest in this business. I was in the education industry for 11 years, and I started to really get focused on non-cognitive skills and building resilience in kids. And how early can we build that? Should we build that in kids? And I started to get interested in Carol Dweck's work on growth and fixed mindsets, and Paul Tuff's work on resilience, and Martin Seligman's work on positive psychology. And that's what made me say, I have something to say about this. I may not have a PhD in psychology, but guess what? I have the experience that's going to help me get through to these people. I can develop a process around this. So that's kind of my background with adversity. And one other thing before I end the note there, a lot of people will compare what they've gone through with others and say, I never went through anything, so what do I have to say about adversity? Well, it's not a comparison game. It's just an understanding and self-awareness of the things that you've gone through that you can identify and use to your advantage rather than letting it go by and just be a piece of the past. That stuff can fuel you in what you're trying to do in the future. So there may be these mini adversity moments or mini inflection points in your life that you can use to your advantage. So so that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people might hear your story and say, "Wow, yeah, I don't have a story of adversity like Nick's, so I can't really leverage that or be successful because of that. I haven't gone through that. I haven't had that adversity." And then other people might say, "Well, I've had so much adversity, I can't be successful." But it's whatever you choose, whatever you decide, because there are people who have had way worse backgrounds than you, and talking to the listener right now, way more struggle than you in their background, and people who have had less struggle than you in their background, people that were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and people who were born poor that on a dirt floor and that have become successful. So it's whatever you choose, whatever if you believe that you can become successful in anything, and you define your own success. I mean, success, I think a lot of people think about money and financial success, but we're talking about relationships, we're talking about health and fitness, we're talking about growth, we're talking about impact on the world, we're talking about
Correct.
If you're a high school sports coach, it's not just winning championships, it's helping kids, learning those life lessons. So I think that's something just to keep in mind. So Nick,
Absolutely.
tell us. So you've got your book, you've got you got a coaching program, and you're a coach, and you've also got a podcast. Tell us more about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I wrote the book last year. I tried to boil down based on experience, and I've talked to hundreds of people, psychologists, people in neuroscientists, science, athletes, high performers across multiple disciplines, just like you have, Jim. And I wanted to distill it down into a simple framework that people could learn from. I could tell a story or a couple of stories from those things, and then also develop some sort of action plan or set of small wins that people can use to start moving in the right direction with these principles. So I developed this book. It's called The Game of Adversity: 8 Principles to Turn Life's Toughest Moments into Your Greatest Opportunities. And you can find it on Amazon. And then I developed a coaching practice from this over the past year and a half, just based on the feedback from the book. They said, are you doing any one-on-one coaching? And I started to do some one-on-one coaching from there. And it's been great. It's been the most rewarding thing that I could possibly do. Just being able to really deeply affect people and develop kind of a routine around the things that mean something to me, kind of going back to first principles on me and not anybody else and what they're doing, has been huge. And to see the results has been a great impact. The podcast is my passion. And Jim, you probably love this just as much as I do. But just being able to have this unique way of reaching out to people that you admire to get their feedback, to understand peak performance and high performance a little bit more. And I learned something new from all of these different guests is pretty cool. So you can find out more about that at nickdinardo.com, as Jim said earlier. But yeah, it's a little bit about my business.
Yeah, and for the listener, if you go to jimharshawjr.com/action, I'll have a link to Nick's website, link to all of his social media, and I'll have a link to the book and everywhere, so you can get access to all that as well. But you can also get, obviously, that at nickdinardo.com. Now, I don't know about you, Nick, but I've interviewed a ton of just tremendously successful people, and their stories of failure and adversity sometimes it just blows my mind. It's really interesting to hear. We always put these people on a pedestal. Is there something that you've noticed, like a common trait that you've seen among successful people that you've interviewed, who have been able to overcome adversity to reach success? I mean, what is it? What is it about certain people that can face this tremendous adversity and be successful, and other people who face the same adversity and they can't get out, they can't rise above it?
Yeah, man, there's some. It's interesting. So I've had the chance to talk to those types of people that always have these. They always have these inflection points in their lives. And the difference between high performers and the average, I always say, is their ability to identify and use these moments of adversity to their advantage rather than avoiding it. And I would say the number one thing is their motivation. Some of them have experienced adversity and get angry about it and let that fuel them into success. The only issue with that is that I don't think that is actually sustainable. And then when they actually do reach some sort of level of success, they need something else to feel happy about that. So they're never kind of present and fulfilled. But then there's this other group of people that uses it as a learning moment, as something that is going to develop their intellect, the growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks a lot about. So they're intrinsically motivated about it, that they can actually be present when they're applying the lessons that they learn from their adversity into the things that they are passionate about, that they want to impact, that they have purpose towards. That I think those are the people that I find the most interesting, and that's how I learn every day about how to use struggle to your advantage too. I'm trying to think of some people that we mutually have interviewed, like Tanner Gears, right? Yeah, sure. He's a great example of that. I mean, could you have, if anybody's comparing themselves and going through struggle, that's a case study in how you should never compare yourself, because Tanner has gone through some things that we'll never have to go through. But what you can learn about is Tanner's positive nature and action-oriented nature in achieving things that many of us who have two eyes to be able to see. Tanner was in a tragic car accident that left him blind, and has gone on to perform at a great level in beat baseball and in the Paralympic Games. That people who have two eyes would never be able to accomplish. So for me, it's that sort of mindset and that approach and that execution driven mindset that I think differentiates them. There's that negative motivation, that kind of extrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation. And I think the two different things, and the intrinsic one is the one that's meaningful to me.
So two follow-ups on that. For the listener, episode 30 is when I interviewed Tanner Gears. Amazing show. Great interview. I mean, the guy's just incredible. His accident happened when he was like 20 years old or something like that. Right. So it's not like it happened when he was like 2. He doesn't really remember. I mean, he had full sight, fully functioning body, and And now, he's had this tremendous setback, and what he's done with it is just incredible. So JimHarshawJr.com/30, just 30, or if you're on iTunes, just scroll back to episode 30 to listen to Tanner. But one thing he said there, Nick, was be present. It's the people who are able to be present and really think about the failure, the struggle, the adversity, the setback, the obstacles that they have or have had, and how that can apply to make them better. It's so hard to do that. And
right.
What I say, if you can do what I call the productive pause, which is a short period of focused reflection around specific questions that leads to clarity of action and peace of mind. If you can do that, if you can hit the pause button on your life, you can actually do that. You can hit the pause button, be present instead of just going, and not actually reflecting. And that's one of the most, that's the single most common trait I've noticed among my guests is they're able to be present. They're able to they pause, they meditate, they journal, they do different things so they can pause and reflect on those experiences in their life. And other ways you can do it is get a coach, hire a coach, join a mastermind group, and get other people to give you that objective input and ask, they're asking you the tough questions that you have to answer. Just like when we were athletes, right, Nick? We had coaches who asked us the right questions and triggered us to say and do the right things. Well, the stakes are much higher in our life now. So I believe everybody needs a coach or at least to be in a mastermind group to get the most out of themselves. So how about a takeaway? So what strategies can we use? Can I use, the listener? What can we use to overcome adversity and that the resulting self-doubt that accompanies any setback or any obstacle? We have that sort of doubt that creeps into our mind, and every single listener has that in their mind right now about something, some aspect of their life. They have that self-doubt. And what strategies can we use to overcome that adversity and succeed despite it? Here's
the first exercise that I usually give to coaching clients and that I actually put in the book. When we're talking about intrinsic motivation or further developing our growth mindset, anybody who's listening to this podcast may not be where they want to be as far as their growth or their performance, but if you're listening, you obviously have some sort of tendency towards this growth mindset. Somebody with a fixed mindset doesn't listen to this,
right?
Where they think intelligence is static. We think intelligence can be grown through focused practice, right? Focused learning, and I talk about this one exercise that is really around explanatory styles, which is what Martin Seligman over at the University of Pennsylvania, Positive Psychology, it's really around self-talk. And just like we would whether we're wrestling and trying to continue to get better as a wrestler or in football, you develop this practice and try and do it every single day. So one thing that you can do, everybody's got a cell phone with probably a voice memo app on the cell phone, right? So I have an iPhone right next to me. I have a voice memo app on there. If you have an Android, you can download one of these for free. What I would do is either – it depends on how aggressive you are, but I would actually take out your voice memo app, take out your phone every hour for, let's say, 4 or 5 hours in a day, and do it for a week. And actually listen to yourself at the end of an hour, and actually put together a 1-minute voice conversation, and just about what you've gone through. Let's say you are an athlete or you are in business. You may have something to say after that hour and say, man, I can't believe my boss is asking me to do this this TPS report right now. I can't. It's bull crap. Why do I have to do this? And just end that. And then maybe the next thing is you had something great with your son happen. I'm just so excited and so grateful that I have this beautiful kid in my life. Blah blah blah. And get this down in your voice memo recorder. Try and do it for 4 or 5 times a day for a week. And at the end, don't listen to them. Just record them. At the end of the week, listen to all of the voice recordings and have pad and paper and a pen with you, and listen and record how many times you had positive self-talk and how many times you had negative self-talk. And when you had negative self-talk, try and see how you could respond in a positive way the next time. So when you're talking about your boss and how pissed off you are about the TPS report, think about, the more times I do this TPS report, the better I will be able to do X, Y, and Z in my job. So I'll develop this skill, and what can I learn from this? And try and see how you can do that, because you're never going to be perfect at talking to yourself with a growth mindset, but you can continue to try and practice it so that you're doing it more often, right? So that's the first exercise that I do, and it's either I have them do it once per day for 21 days, or you can try and do it a little bit more intensive for a week and see what you're doing, and then try and make it a morning routine practice. So it's just a self-talk exercise.
I love that. That's a great exercise. And here's the other thing. Very few of us are going to know, so we're going, okay, this is a self-talk exercise. You can either be honest and really have, I think what you're talking about is get your honest. That's it. Words that are really going on inside of you, that self-talk, what's really, going on. And then you eventually, you're really going to start holding yourself accountable and going, okay, it's time to record. Guess what? I got a negative thought in my head. I'm going to flip the switch. I'm going to change it to positive, And that's just that's that productive pause. That is a productive pause. That is hitting the pause button and doing something that is, sure, is it gonna take you longer to add to your workday or take away from other things? Sure, but you know what? In the long run, you're gonna make yourself better. You're gonna improve. You're gonna be more focused. You're gonna develop better self-talk and really learn something about yourself. Man, that's powerful. That's a great exercise.
Yeah. Nick. And we focus on our physical fitness, right? But very rarely do we actually have a productive practice around our mental fitness. And if you do that 1 minute for 5 times a day, that's 5 minutes out of your day. It's just like a workout. Like if you work out, or maybe you didn't work out that day, but you told your trainer that you did work out, then you're lying to yourself. It's just like the same thing that you would do with this. Okay, if you say you're going to do it, and it takes 5 minutes or a minute a day. Just take the time. It actually does make you better over time.
Love that. That's a great little exercise. And for the listener, I'll have that detailed and documented in the action plan from this episode. JimHarshawJr.com/action if you want to grab that. Nick, can you tell us what about another book? So we've got your book, okay? I'm going to have that linked in the show notes and the action plan here. Is there another book that you can recommend? Any other books that you've read? Maybe it's one book, maybe it's 2 or 3, but I know my listeners like to get a book or 2 out of this. Sure.
So there's 2 books that I highly recommend. 3 books. Here's 3, and I won't spend too much time on it. One is about morning routines, and it's called Daily Rituals by Mason Curry. Have you heard about that, Jim?
I've not.
That book?
No.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's all different artists from different disciplines in art. Ernest Hemingway's morning routine. It's got a whole, Picasso, all this sort of stuff. But what you learn, what you learn in the book is that there's no one way to do it. So some people wake up at 5:30 in the morning. Some wake up at 11. Some will wake up and get right down to writing. Some will, hang out with their family and then decide to write in the afternoon. What it taught me was I don't have to develop somebody else's practice. I'll develop my practice. So it's a great book, very easy to read, something I go back to time to time.
And let me reflect on that real quick for the listener.
Sure.
Every athlete has a peak performance routine. You've got to figure when you were an athlete or for your coach, we had that peak performance routine. I finally figured that out later in my college years, like what my peak performance routine was. And, for some people it was listening to music and getting pumped up. For me and my coach, my sports psychologist, my coach, my mindset coach helped me figure this out, and he's still a factor in my life today. I'm very thankful for that. But he helped me figure out that you know what I had to do, Nick? I actually had to, before a wrestling match, I had to remove myself from it. I had to go out. I typically go out in a hallway or in a corridor or in the locker room, and I'd read a magazine, totally get my mind just after I warmed up, after I did everything else. And I told my teammate, one of my buddies, I said, Jason, come back and get me when it's about, I got about 5 minutes until I'm stepping on the mat, and he'd come get me, and I'd come out and just do my last couple of things from a part of my routine. I'd step on the mat, and the season of my career was the best season of my career. So anyway, peak performance routines, I think that's really powerful, and they're all different for everybody. So good recommendation. What's your next one?
Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Just unbelievable book.
Yep.
Victor Frankl, just a renowned psychologist, psychotherapist, was, it's a story of him in the Nazi concentration camps, and what he noticed in those camps was it wasn't the strongest who survived, it was the ones who were filled with the most meaning and purpose in their lives outside of the camp. And just for me, just a phenomenal book. I wrote a chapter all around purpose because of the inspiration that he gave me in that book, and it's another one that I go back to every single year just to learn from.
Yeah, great book.
That's another one. And the last one is just the most recent book that I read is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. Phenomenal. Just if you are just interested in really deep thinking and philosophy, he talks a lot about, it's a cross-country trip with his son, 11-year-old son, and it's really just it's an inquiry into examining quality and values. Really deep book. It'll take you a while to get through it, but a great read on philosophy and life.
Great stuff. And again, for the listener, I have these listed all in the action plan. Nick, can you take a minute before we wrap up and promote yourself? Just kind of tell us where the listener can find you, follow you online. Obviously, we got nickdinardo.com, but what about some social media and any other things you're working on?
Yeah, Jim, thanks so much for having me on and allowing to interact with your audience. So you can find out more about me and the work that I'm doing at nickdinardo.com. You can find the book. Just go to amazon.com and put in The Game of Adversity. You can also go to thegameofadversity.com as well. For Jim's listeners, I have a 5-day course on overcoming overwhelm. You can find that at nickdinardo.com/overwhelm. And Twitter is the place that you can find me most. Nick DiNardo 33 on Twitter.
Excellent. We'll have all those linked up in the show notes or the action plan as well. Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks again, Jim. Really appreciate it, and keep up the amazing work, man.
And for the listener, until next time, just like when you were an athlete, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.